March 4th, 1910, 11:43 p.m. Rogers Pass, British Columbia. The temperature sits at -18 Celsius. William LeChance stands in the cab of rotary plow number 1, feeling the machine shudder beneath his boots. Outside the small window, the beam from the locomotive's headlamp cuts through swirling snow, illuminating nothing but white chaos. The rotary's spinning blades at the front throw snow 60 feet into the air, a mechanical cyclone boring through drifts that have buried the Canadian Pacific Railway's main line for the third time this week. The plow weighs 91 tons. Its rotating wheel, driven by a dedicated steam engine, can chew through 15 feet of packed snow. Tonight, it's attacking a drift 20 feet deep, advancing at walking speed through Cascade Canyon. Behind it, 2 more locomotives push. Ahead, somewhere in the darkness, 62 men are working. LeChance doesn't hear the avalanche coming. No one does. Rogers Pass sits in the Selkirk Mountains, a violent fold of rock and ice where the Canadian Pacific Railway carved its route to the Pacific in the 1880s. The engineers knew what they were building. They understood that threading rails through avalanche country meant accepting certain risks. But the alternative, routing hundreds of miles south through American territory, was politically unacceptable to a young nation trying to bind itself together with steel. By 1910, the railway had developed sophisticated avalanche defense systems. Snow sheds, wooden tunnels built over the tracks, protected the most dangerous sections. Observation posts watched the slopes, and when slides blocked the line, rotary plows cleared them quickly. The rotary snowplow was industrial-age brute force made manifest. Invented in the 1880s, it transformed snow removal from hand labor into mechanical warfare. The Canadian Pacific owned several. Number 1 was their workhorse, a marriage of locomotive and giant auger that could work through conditions that defeated conventional plows. March 1910 had been merciless. Storm after storm buried the pass. Slides closed the line repeatedly. Work crews labored around the clock, clearing tracks, rebuilding snow sheds damaged by avalanches. The railway's reputation depended on keeping the transcontinental route open. Delays meant lost revenue and lost prestige. On March 4th, another slide had blocked the line near the eastern entrance to Cascade Canyon. The rotary was dispatched. Standard procedure: attack the snow, clear the tracks, restore service. The rotary plow advanced through the drift like a predator through deep grass. Inside its cab, the crew, engineer, fireman, rotary operator, worked in synchronized rhythm. Steam pressure had to be maintained. The rotating wheel had to be fed snow at precisely the right rate. Too slow, and the blades merely spun. Too fast, and the whole machine could jam. Behind the rotary, 2 locomotives provided the pushing power. Their combined weight and traction drove the plow forward. The crews in those cabs felt every lurch, every resistance as the rotary bit into compacted snow. And around the machines, in the darkness and the storm, 62 men worked. Track maintenance crews, labourers clearing snow from switches and sidings, foremen supervising. Most were recent immigrants, Japanese workers who had come to build the railway and stayed. Some were Canadian labourers. A few were railway employees with years of mountain experience. They worked by lantern light and locomotive headlamps. The wind tore at their clothes. Snow caked on beards and eyebrows. This was just another night on the Canadian Pacific's Mountain Division. Brutal, exhausting, routine. At 11:47 p.m., the routine ended. The avalanche originated somewhere on the slope above them. Exactly where remains uncertain. What is known? Several million pounds of snow, loosened by the weak storms and the vibration from the rotary's engines, let go. It moved at roughly 120 kilometers per hour. The men on the ground had perhaps 3 seconds of warning, a sound like distant thunder, rising to a roar that drowned out the locomotives. Some ran. Most simply looked up. The avalanche struck the rotary plow first. 91 tons of steam-powered machinery, anchored to rails by its own massive weight and pushed forward by 2 locomotives, was lifted bodily into the air. Witnesses later described it rising like a child's toy thrown by an angry giant. The plough travelled approximately 15 meters before it came down, tumbling, crushing, obliterating everything beneath it. The two locomotives behind it were torn from the rails and hurled down the slope. And the 62 men working in and around the machines, were swept away. Some were crushed instantly by the plough's descent. Others were buried in snow. A few were thrown clear, only to be caught by the secondary wave of the avalanche as it continued down the canyon. The entire event lasted less than 30 seconds. Silence follows every avalanche, the terrible quiet after catastrophic noise. Railway crews from the nearby station reached the site within an hour. What they found defied comprehension. The rotary plough lay on its side, a mechanical corpse broken and twisted. The locomotives were gone, buried somewhere downslope. And everywhere, nowhere, were the bodies of 62 men. The rescue operation became a recovery operation almost immediately. No one buried under that much snow in those temperatures would survive long. Crews began digging. They worked through what remained of the night and into the next day, then the next, then the next. They recovered bodies slowly. Some were found still holding lanterns. Others were discovered frozen in postures of flight or defense, arms raised as if they could ward off thousands of tons of snow. Many were never found whole. The avalanche's violence had been absolute. The final count, 62 dead. 58 were identified, 4 remained unknown. Among the dead were entire families' breadwinners, fathers who had sent money home to Japan, to China, to eastern Canada. Young men who had come west seeking opportunity. Veterans of mountain railways who had survived dozens of smaller slides. The Canadian Pacific Railway Company faced immediate crisis. This wasn't the first avalanche disaster. The railway had lost men to slides before. But this was the largest single loss of life in the company's history. The public demanded answers. The government ordered investigations. Why had the rotary been operating in active avalanche conditions? Why were so many men concentrated in one location? Had proper precautions been observed? The investigations revealed uncomfortable truths. The railway's avalanche defense system, while sophisticated for its era, was fundamentally reactive. Observation posts could see slides coming, but couldn't predict them. Snow sheds could protect tracks, but not work crews operating outside them. And the economic pressure to keep the line open meant accepting risks that, in hindsight, appeared unacceptable. The railway defended its procedures. Avalanche work was inherently dangerous. The men knew the risks. Every precaution that could reasonably be taken had been taken. The March 4th slide was simply unpredictable, a random catastrophe in terrain where catastrophes were always possible. But the numbers haunted that defense. 62 men, in one instant, doing work the railway demanded but could not adequately protect. Within months, the Canadian Pacific began planning a solution that would eliminate Rogers Pass from the main line entirely. The Connaught Tunnel, 5 miles of bore through the heart of Mount Macdonald, opened in 1916. Trains ran beneath the avalanche slopes instead of across them. The tunnel cost $8 million and took 5 years to complete. It also eliminated the worst of the avalanche danger. Rogers Pass, which had claimed hundreds of lives in the railway's first decades, became a secondary route, then eventually just a memory in Canadian railway history. But the tunnel was also a monument. Every train that passed through it in safety was passing through space purchased with 62 lives. Every passenger who rode unknowing beneath the Selkirks was benefiting from a disaster so total that it forced a company and a nation to admit the cost of their ambitions. The rotary plough was eventually recovered, repaired, and returned to service. It worked for decades more, clearing snow from less dangerous sections of track. Number 1 became just another piece of railway equipment, used, maintained, eventually retired. But in March 1910, for 30 seconds, it was something else. It was proof that human engineering, no matter how massive or powerful, remains subject to forces we cannot control. 91 tons of locomotive and steel, lifted and thrown like debris in a flood. The men who died that night were not heroes in the traditional sense. They were workers, labourers, railway employees doing difficult, dangerous work because it paid wages their families needed. Their names, those that were recorded, appear on memorials and in railway company records. Most are forgotten now, more than a century distant. What remains is the story itself. The specific horror of that night, the image of an enormous machine rising into darkness, the silence that followed, and the question that every disaster asks: what is the acceptable cost of progress? Rogers Pass has an answer. It's written in bedrock and steel. It's carried in 5 miles of tunnel. It's counted in 62 lives. The railway runs on.